All right. Welcome to Comics Karma. Um, I'm Tom Hart. You're at the Sequential Artist Workshop. I'm with
Lauren Weinstein am at my house in New Jersey.
Nice. And do you have your rattlesnake plant, your rattlesnake wrangler plant, or what is it called?
Yeah, rattlesnake master. I can
Oh,
see that some of them are coming up in my yard now too.
huh.
It is.
So that tall, reedy plant is a rattlesnake master.
Yeah, it's
Huh.
dead.
Okay.
I mean, this thing, I'm kind of just using it as a stake for other plants, but I really like the way it looked.
I just don't understand. We're gonna have to research that. It's not like we don't have Google and Wikipedia at our fingertips, but we'll have to figure it out. So, Lauren, how's your project? We've been checking in every week
Oh
with
yeah.
you and Calamity.
Okay,
20
so
years in the making.
yeah, I and it's going well. I'm still a little behind schedule, but I've almost penciled this whole acid trip story. And that was with a couple things that I knew were going to be big um, distractions. One was going to the premiere of this film that I did on Thursday, which was quite amazing, actually. If I'm going to be honest, I had zero expectations of what this film festival was going to be like. But it just like meeting other cartoonists that are wonderful and weirdos that kind of are pursuing this vision. I met a lot of filmmakers. I met this person that was doing like a crazy pan-Asian martial arts feminist film. And I met um this other, like, she was a student and she won one of the things in the festival from Brooklyn College and did like a 30-minute movie that was just fantastic. And all these different, a 65-year-old woman who went to Columbia Film School 30 years ago, had kids, and is now just making a movie about a Korean grandma who's buying her grandson pot. And it was hilarious. And she commanded the stage,
Mhm.
and so much fun to talk to her afterwards. So all of that was just incredibly moving. I felt so honored to have our movie in that space with all these other people.
Wow.
So it was great. And then I've just been trying to organize my time so that I can finish. I'm 2 pages away from finish penciling this story. So, and then actually, and this ties into Lynn's question too. In On April 20th, I'm going to Ireland to spend time with one of the people who is a character in my book. So, and so she's going to have, and this is all stuff from high school, but she's going to, I am going to spend a week in Ireland with her, and I'm going to ask her lots and lots of questions about her experiences in high school. And I'm going to take a lot of notes, and that's going to round me out for the last 2 chapters of this book.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask because like the book is largely like conceived and somewhat written, but you're sort of holding on to this ending section
Yes.
and you've got some like hopeful revelations or something
Yeah,
coming.
I'm kind
Oh,
of, yeah, the last 2 chapters have always been a little murky. Like there are several ways I could go. And I
huh?
just have this feeling that she's going to give me some answers. And also, she's going to be the first person from high school to actually look over this book. And so, all the things, Lynn, that I think you're about to ask about are kind of going to come to a head in a couple weeks. And I'm scared, but it should be okay.
Cool. We'll get to that in a minute. I love that though. I do love writing stories like that where you're like, I don't know. I know ending is going to be awesome. I just have to sort of like get there. And it's kind of a quest, right? The
Yeah,
story itself is kind of a quest to get to the awesome answers
right.
somehow that will come, but you're never 100% sure. But it sounds wow. It's like a quest overseas, like you're traveling across.
Overseas, exactly, to a place where my friend says that time stops. Like that
Nice.
there's something about going to Donegal, Ireland,
Mm.
where time is not a thing. So I just can't wait. And then 2 weeks later, I'm going to Yaddo to flesh out what this is. So it's like I actually have the time to think about what I'm about to learn.
Oh, this Ireland trip better be fruitful. This lady better come through with her
Yeah.
revelation.
Well, she is, how I was talking about crew last week. She
Yeah.
was the person that got me to do crew. So she is the rower and she's the knower.
All right. Um,
Sorry.
no, it's awesome. I can't wait. So wait, well, we'll talk about podcast scheduling and stuff. I don't know if it
I think okay, yeah, we'll talk
will be
about
done. Okay, anyway. So we've got a guest today. You've alluded twice to Lynn's questions. Let's bring Lynn on. Lynn, are you ready to unmute and say hello?
Unmuted and good to go.
Yeah. Hi, Lynn. It's really nice to see you. And
Yeah, hi
what a
Lily.
it. I
Hi,
great
love your
both of you.
glasses.
I've been loving the past two podcasts are great. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with the both of you. It's cool. So
Right.
yeah, so what I don't know, Lauren, I don't know if Tom told you what I'm writing, but it's for people who don't know, I do want me to give a quick background.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
So it's a memoir that was about an incident when my husband had a manic episode, which is about 30 years ago. And at the time, about 3 years after when he started getting better, we started writing this, and we wrote the manuscript, and it still is in alternating sections. It's kind of a braided story because our experiences were so different. And they were both parts were written in prose, and at the time, it was kind of pretty easy to write right through it. It was just the facts, the facts, the facts. We wrote the manuscript through, done and doneer, and then 20 years passed and I had to work and I couldn't work on this. And we had an agent who said she couldn't, she had no idea. She didn't have a good feeling of what I was feeling through this, which was mostly stress and I was frozen. And that's pretty much how I wrote it when we did this. And I thought the only way I could really reach my feelings is to do it in comic form. And it was fine. I mean, it really was fine because for most of the period, I knew what I had to do. I was moving forward. It was great. We wrote the story I mean, I did my part in pencil until the part where I stopped being the hero. And Jonathan, he was finally not manic anymore. Things were not chaotic but he was depressed and he was a hot mess and he was angry about having to been hospitalized and I was exhausted and um really I had an affair. And it was and it was fun and we had talked about it afterwards in couples therapy. We actually ended up writing the book the first time through while we were working through our relationship. And then I realized I needed to put the affair in because otherwise it looked like I was that this character is this heroic, save the day angel who got through with, and just unscathed and just a perfect person, which nobody is, and it would made the character unbelievable. And I had to, right, with my own therapist, I worked out that I really did have to tell him, and I didn't want the secret between us. And so we worked through that in couples therapy too, and it was fine. And now 20 years later, I got to that part in the book and everything went along really well, penciling along happily for 192 pages until I got to this. And it was like, to make it work, I had to go back into the feelings that made me have the affair. And it was really like this, sort of, it was like an addiction. I was infatuated and I had to think about I had to get back into all the feelings that drove me to do this, which were really kind of gross for me, and it was very hard to, it's just very upsetting. And I had to, yeah, go through that again. And so when you come to, yeah. So my question is I guess my question is do you have those moments and how do you deal with them? And yeah, I mean, I ended up trying, I did reframe the affair as, a reaction to stress the person I had the affair with was certainly not somebody that I ever would have married. He was a really nice guy, fun guy, but very different. I mean, he's like kind of likes boxing and horse racing and, you know, you know, just the kind of like Borscht Belt schmaltz humor. And he's a little older than me, and it's like not my kind of person at all. He's a little bit, homophobic and whatever. A little, he saw himself as a Casanova, not the kind of guy I mean, he told me that. So it was pretty safe in terms of not going to destroy my marriage, but it was, and it kept me away from Jonathan and my son, who was 5 at the time. And yeah, so it was very yucky getting back into that. I don't know if you have any questions to ask.
Lauren?
Yeah. I mean, so this is one of the hardest things when you're making comics. I mean, you've put your finger on like it's so first of all, what you said about uh feeling like you couldn't uh, getting into all those feelings again, which feel like addiction when you're working on comics, which is such a visceral experience. Like you can't not relive this stuff. Like you could maybe listen to a political podcast while you're working through your feelings of lust and whatever, but you can't escape those feelings. And so that's hard in itself. And then revealing something where you're not perfect is what makes a good narrative. And so I totally understand why you want to have it in your book and you don't want to not have it. But
Right.
it's like, how can you build those barriers in so that it's safe to work on? And
Yeah.
that is the question. So are there things that you have done to kind of build, like to build?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things is I really came to realize that, I did it, and it was funny because it was in another group that where I was workshopping it here on the Mighty Network. And the facilitators, Hyena Hell, she pointed out that she said, "Of course you did this. She said, of course you did it.
Yeah.
You've been going through hell in a handbasket, and here's this guy. You have been taking care of other people, putting yourself taken care of, really just and with nobody to take care of you for, like 2 years. And the stress was enormous. And so, of course, here's this guy who comes along, and he's like this, nice, big, solid guy who's making absolutely no demands on you. And he's just there to entertain you, and he likes you, and he's interested in you. Of course, this is going to happen. So that really helped me forgive myself to have somebody outside say that. But it was still nasty. I mean, I had to go through all those journals. Oh my God, it's like reading an adolescent journal it's like you look at your adolescent journals and you go, oh, yuck.
Yeah.
Yuck.
Lynn,
As
have you written this section and you're just struggling with drawing it, or are you struggling with everything about telling the narrative?
Well, I've pretty much written most of it. And I've decided to really abbreviate a lot of it. I'm also struggling with the fact that this guy is going to be identified, and he's got kids. He left his wife, but it was not me that made him leave his wife. That marriage was in trouble. So it's a whole pile of things about it. It's just, and
so
yeah.
yeah. So that is actually where I think a boundary could be made in terms of um, figuring out how to change this guy enough so that it feels like, how can you make somebody analogous to this person, but maybe he doesn't have kids in the story, like, unless that's you know, are there ways that you can change this a
Well,
little bit?
yeah, it's going to have to be changed so much. I mean,
Yeah,
I worked for a major magazine, and a lot of the people that worked there at the time are still alive.
yeah,
So
And
make it a TV program,
I
right?
guess,
I mean, I
right.
think that's what Lauren's saying.
Yeah,
yeah, I guess I have to really fictionalize the
yeah. I
business.
I would. And I think that you can get to the emotional truth and even more easily if you build in those fictional
Oh, that's
barriers.
interesting. Oh, really make it 1 degree separated or 3 degrees separated from me, and then
Yeah.
they really will become characters from in another story.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, that's
Um,
interesting.
like I have a couple different boyfriends in my story that are all kind of like clusters of people. Like I've taken some things from some people and some things from some other people, and then they've sort of evolved into their own person. And it's actually really interesting to have conversations with those people in my comics because they're not real, but they're kind of consistently not quite real people. But I
Yeah.
and I know that that could make your hackles go up a little bit because you've been so attached to telling the story. Like, I think there's something daunting about the idea of making something up a little bit, but I think as soon as you make that switch, even just giving this guy another name and always calling him, like, that's a great place to start. Giving him a different hairstyle, giving him, changing his height, changing his body type.
Yeah, because the pictures look just like him.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, one thing,
Yeah.
an exercise that might be helpful is to find an actor who is,
I've got him in mind already.
yeah, but who's
Talking.
different though, but different, but the same, like could kind of do the same things, but be a different person, and then maybe use that as like him as a stand-in or something like that. Like that might be just something to try to
Change it
start.
up even. When you choose your actor, like don't trade one Batman for another Batman. Like really,
Right,
Really.
go for Dan Aykroyd or something, right?
Yeah, yeah,
right,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
right, right. Go for
Oh,
Dan.
that's great. Woody Allen.
Right, right.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's great. Give him glasses. That's great.
I
Yeah,
think
totally.
I
Yeah.
think too, you tell me, you can both tell me if you think this is right, but I think there'll be if you fictionalize that character a little bit more, there'll be a safety when you feel those feelings again. And it might even be
Yes.
Yeah.
kind of awesome in a way because you won't be it won't be as dangerous, right?
Yeah, I
you
can
can
already
be
feel loose. Yes, if
oh,
I can feel looser and freer even thinking about it that way. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I was thinking of changing his name a little this, a little that, but I was really hanging on to the facts and the
right.
exact circumstances. But I can, why not? Okay. I
Yeah,
mean,
because I think if the important facts here are is your reaction to them. It's not really him. He could be a dozen different kinds of guys, you know?
so
Like, I mean, like all of the descriptions that you gave are very generic in terms of a type of person. And there are many different bodies that could fulfill that.
stand
Um,
in those shoes. Yeah.
yeah.
Or lay in that bed, such as it were. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, and it's like the work that I've done for survivors of domestic violence, it was very so I was telling the story of them. I did a project called The Gift of Time for Slate, and it was incredibly important that I changed their identities and change certain things about their stories because in some cases they were do in battles with the court, in the court system. So just didn't want them to get in any more trouble. Like through this comic, the comic should be an empowering experience for them. This is a different situation than you're talking about, but I found that changing certain things about their identities and their kids, and it freed me up. It gave me the ability to make them not perfect, to make tell their stories in the fullness that they needed to be told. And as long as you make that note too, like it's a
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really that really that sounds like a lot of fun. It's interesting because I used to teach third grade, and one of the things that I had them do to is take personal stories and change their character into a different person. And
Mhm.
put in the situation that they wrote in their little like narrative about themselves. And it really did free them up.
Yeah.
It's great. It's
It
good.
also can free you up to be a complete asshole if you want to, like in terms of a narrative, like
Yeah.
it lets things flow a little bit more
Yeah.
in a really positive way.
Way.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that yeah, like, so maybe when we end the after the podcast is over, you just do different character, you it's almost like casting.
Yeah, I'll have a little
Um,
casting call sheet
yeah.
possible. Yeah, yeah, yes. Yeah, it's really interesting. And in fact, I'm probably gonna have to do that with a bunch of people. You know, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm gonna have to do
Do you
that.
think do you think that we've solved one of the main I mean, it sounds like there were a couple sort of very discrete issues. One of them was you just sort of didn't weren't super happy about this guy being identified. It would cause him some problems. Do you think if you do the changes we've been talking about, that will not happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it will be at least, I think, once people see my name, I mean, anyone who's connected with me from that world will probably know who it was. But
Well, I mean,
at least there
your
won't be
intimates
any.
are always going to
You
figure
you
things
could have
out.
met him at a coffee shop or on a plane or
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, actually, there's so much of it really. I mean, a lot of the texture that makes it real comes from what I can see. I can try to, I'll see what I could do, how far I can take it away from what really happened. But yeah, I think yeah, that's pretty great. It's pretty great. And then, yeah, yeah,
it is interesting when you're working on a very long project to pinpoint what the barriers are,
Mm.
like to and how important it is to, like, it sounds like you're working on some very tough material, but the fact that you wrote it with your husband for so many years and that you guys have been working, you have, decades of distance, you've been working through it with a therapist, so that that's all cleared. But it's like when you get to this one thing, that really becomes the sticking point.
Yeah, yeah. And then, the therapist passed away, which is fine. We were just seeing her because we loved her at that point. I mean, it's not fine because we miss her dearly, deeply,
Huh.
terribly. She was like fantastic. But yeah, it was interesting because once we started writing, when I got to this part, Jonathan's been great, but then yeah, we had to go through a whole thing all over again and it was funny because at the time this guy I was having the affair with was reluctant and he was like, your husband's not in his right mind. He's gonna come after me with a knife and kill me. I'm like, you don't know you don't not Jonathan, my sweet guy. He's like a big bear. It's like, no, there's like no way he wouldn't hurt a fly. And it was true, he wouldn't have. And he was just upset when he first found out, 15, 20 years ago. But when we were doing this again, it just brought up all of his feelings. He's saying, I'm going to go after him and I'm going to just kill him. I'm going to kill him like Jonathan. But we got past that.
But he could kill, I'm hesitant to use any name because I don't know. But
Right.
I get
Exactly. That's
Mr.
not part of the book. I said, listen,
Mr.
yeah, the writing of the books, it stops. No, we're going to stop this. No, our current life is not part of this.
Yeah.
It's just not.
But you could burn that picture and the cat, like you could
Yeah,
burn
yeah, yeah,
the casted in replacement in
yeah, 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 yeah. Exactly, exactly. I know it's really. Oh my God.
Well,
Yeah.
this has been really intense. It's almost like this is like your life's work, Lynn, in some cases. Like
I
you've
know
been
you were there at the very beginning.
and
Well,
yeah, and you've been
Yeah,
at SVA, but
I remember too, Lynn. I
I
think,
thought you were there. I
yeah,
thought I met Lauren at
yeah.
SVA. Yeah.
I'm remembering this too. It's incredible. Yeah,
it's interesting
it
how
actually it makes
go
me
ahead.
feel good because I've been working on this narrative for so long, but for similar reasons. Like there are points when sticky points where you don't want to hurt somebody.
Right. Well, the reason I stopped was because I had to work for, I had, I started working and I didn't have time. I didn't have
Yeah.
the bandwidth with full-time job to do this. And then when I retired 5 years ago, I had a few projects that I wanted to do. And I thought, okay, no, this is the one that I'm the only one that could tell this story. So I'm going to do this one. And so it's been a few years and yeah,
There are things that happen to us in life that just define our entire lives sometimes, right? And sometimes we just are
yeah.
telling a story. I don't know if Lauren feels that way.
Yes.
I mean, it
Ex
sounds like what the story, if I am correct, Lauren, the story you're telling now is about these really crucial, important moments when you became an artist in your adolescence. I know there's more to
Hmm.
it than that.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, a lot of my story is about my mom, who to this day is like a tireless activist, and I would never ever want to hurt her. But she fell asleep at the wheel when I was like 13. She was like driving to a press conference about like helping poor people. And so um I had all sorts of, bad feelings about that. And but it's all in the service of trying to tell a story about um, caring for the world and like understanding where the limits are there. And, and so my mom has, given me like she trusts that I'm not throwing her under the bus, but it's hard to not have those feelings, just as you said, Lynn, like when you're working through those things, you want to be really it can't not take you there again.
yeah. I mean, I think that it's interesting about this stories that define who we are. I mean, I don't know if Rosalie Lightning was like that for you in some
Yeah.
ways, or I know Mouse for Art Spiegelman certainly. I mean, that was like his big. I mean, he hasn't done anything huge like that before, but they're important stories, and I think, what, one thing that I don't know if it's true for you and your mom, but I know for me, even people like the guy I had the affair with. I have compassion for all the people that even I berated at the time. Now I
Right.
do, and it's kind of, I remember hearing, a novelist talking about the fact that to make, any book really work, you have to love even your most despicable characters, and I'm finding that it's an interesting thing to do that, like to have compassion, you know, for people that I might otherwise be really,
Lynn,
what I was totally fed up with at the time.
Lynn, is there an overarching theme, or I'm going to use a word that we usually don't like to use, but is there an overarching lesson in this project that you are gleaning? Like in working on it for so long, are you, and maybe it's just what you just said, which is about compassion for all the players, but is there something, what's the
No,
big,
I
what's
think, what drew me to it is realizing how it's really about mental illness more than anything, and that it took more than a village. It took so much knowledge, expertise, and connections to get Jonathan and our relationship through this. It
Mm,
took so much professional help and family, the strength of his family, and it breaks my heart to think, and we've run into other people who have, in the course of his treatment, who didn't have that,
right.
and it's just so difficult. And on the other hand, it's also a story about, the some of the things that we went through, or things that marriages completely break up over. And, we managed to keep together through it. And I think, what Jonathan did is kind of amazing. It's like this, the kind of under emotional understanding that he brought to the relationship, and what is so unlike a lot of what men bring to relationships, because they've conditioned out of being able to feel or understand their emotions in so many ways as boys. I mean, I think stuff that people might think what would be the end of a relationship really doesn't necessarily mean. I mean, it's not a reason to break up always. That relationships can get through really difficult things in the right circumstances. So I don't know. So yeah,
Hmm.
And that is like the essence of your story. And so this other stuff, it's like just,
You mean like who the guy was and the
yeah,
details?
yeah.
yeah,
They're less important than getting at that truth that you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah. No, it's absolutely true. Yeah, the names of the doctors that were derelict in their duty.
Yeah, we all get really attached to the facts, you know. And Sally mentioned that in the chat, and you mentioned it early on. I want to sort of go back really fast, and then maybe we can wind down. But when you said your first draft of this was all in prose, and you were really just sticking to the facts, and you weren't broadcasting any feelings. You weren't sort of letting in any of the feelings. And so that changed when you were drawing. So it's kind of the same thing in some ways, right? It's like we get attached to the facts, and we're not honoring the truth of the emotional truth of it. So
Yeah, and it's interesting because that really has been something that in the course of working on it this time, I'm learning to like let go of the facts and really just concentrate on the narrative and the feelings behind it and what's important to keep driving it forward. And yeah,
hmm.
yeah.
So Lauren, how'd we do? Did we solve Lynn's problems? I know I should ask Lynn, but
That was great.
okay.
It's all been for me. Well, stay tuned. Let me put it to the test and I'll let you know.
I know,
Yeah.
I want to see your drawings of the sky.
I'll show you the before and after.
Yeah. No, I don't want to see that.
Before
The
Lauren, no, the
before. I
before
only want
Lauren
to
and
see the
after
after.
Lauren.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, Lynn, we're so glad we could help.
Yeah, it's been great.
I'm so
Really
glad
great.
Lauren could help is what I should say, because that was
No.
all
Well,
Lauren.
but Tom, I actually do. Maybe this is a thing for another time, but you touched on it, Lynn, where you said, how did you draw Rosalie Lightning? Like, weren't there parts that you felt like you were gonna, how did you make it so that you could do it?
Well, the main thing that might be relevant here is although it's not exactly an analog, is that early on in the process, I thought I had to tell the whole story. And in particular, that led me to the really painful parts. And I realized and I was like, okay, I gotta like tell this really painful part. And I realized in doing that, I was trying to make the reader feel pain. And I was trying to make the reader feel really horrible in order to sort of like experience my story. And then at some point I was like, what the hell am I doing? Like I don't want to relive these particularly really horrible parts, and I don't want to put a reader through that. What is my story really about? And
Mm.
the story was really about the healing and the sort of reintegration of things. And so I focused on those things. There's a lot in the notebooks that didn't make it because they just weren't relevant to that arc. It's not a similar thing because there weren't names to change and things like that,
Mhm.
but there were places to avoid for the sake of story, but also the sake of my mental health and everybody's.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
totally.
All right.
So
So
yeah, thank you.
sure. Thanks, Lynn. Lauren, do you want to hear my acid trip comic story? Sent
Yeah.
to wind down. Well, it's just a silly story, but since you were talking about it, like I'm still working on this acid trip sequence or whatever, it reminds me, and I'm going to throw my friend Ed Brubaker under the bus here. I love Ed, but we like to do that sometimes. But anyway, so when Ed was starting out as a comic writer, he was always a pretty good comic writer, but as a mainstream one, he he got a job to reboot Prez. It was a 60s DC comic. It was a teenage kid, and this was in the grunge era. So this was re branded as like Prez smells like teen president. It was really ridiculous, stupid stuff. Sorry, Ed. But and he had Eric Shanower working for him. Eric is an amazing artist. He's famous especially for a bunch of Oz books, but other books as well. And he and Ed were very good friends. And so um, Ed and they managed to get this project together. But anyway, so as we were all just like these young punks, and we were watching Ed become this like mainstream writer, and we slowly realized like, oh, he gets paid. Back then it was like $125 a page to write, and Eric Shanower would get, I don't know, 300 or something. So there in this Prez comic, there was like this 2-page sequence where like he's tripping on some sort of mezcal or something, and the double page spread was just said, Prez opens up his chest and shows all the horrors inside. And like that, he got paid $250 for that. And then Eric Shanower had to draw for like 3 weeks to make this magnificent chest opening strip out scene. And we were like, man, Ed, you got such a scam going on. all. That's my story. No, love it. And it was really good that was a great it was a good experience for him and to get with Eric. Anyway, that's my trip story, my tripping comic.
Yeah, that sucks that he couldn't provide more detail. I want to know what the score is.
It was probably a little more detailed, but it probably was like, horses with human bodies and, stuff like that. And then Eric's a very detailed artist, right? And really had to make that magnificent. And Eric and it just got paid, $250 for a couple lines of prose.
Well, I feel like I have a pretty good graphic. I'll send this in for the podcast this week of my fake boyfriend, the one that I cast for the one that shows up in this acid trip, who was not the real guy that I met, but somebody totally different. And honestly, I love hanging out with him in this comic. It
Oh,
is great to have very unsafe conversations with him and realize that it's all in the in the realm of fantasy,
that's
sort of.
awesome. I love how tenderly you said that. That's really fantastic. Oh,
Um,
now I feel bad for my bad feelings about Ed. Ed, I love you. Write me, okay? Send me a text.
yeah,
Okay.
and you were doing exactly what you needed to do in that situation.
Okay. Well, thanks. Next week we have uh Dusty McGowan. He's not on today's call, I don't think, but Dusty's got a question and I don't forget what it is, but we'll queue up Dusty for next week. Um,
Awesome.
Lauren, thanks for joining us
And
again.
thank you, Lynn, and thanks,
Yeah,
Tom. This
thanks,
is so
Lynn.
much fun. I really love this. I've been looking forward to this every week. Every week is so much fun.
You guys are great. Thank you.
Oh, really awesome. All right, everybody, thanks. We'll see you in a week. This has really, really been fun. Thanks so much, Lynn.
Thanks.
Let us know
Thank
how it
you.
goes. Okay, bye,
Yep.
everybody.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us. This has been a production of the Sequential Artists Workshop, or SAW. You can find us on social media at Comics Workshop and online at sawcomics.org. There you can also hear about our many courses and intensives and in-person programs. SAW is a non-profit supported by people like you. Learn how to make a tax-deductible donation at the donate page of sawcomics.org. You can join our free community of comics explorers at members.sawcomics.org. Thanks so much for being here.